I was really well qualified for that role and yet I didn't get the job. This can be really frustrating if you're in a job search process, you meet a firm you particularly like, the interviews seem to be going really well and yet you didn't get the job. Now, if this happens as just a one-off, well, things can happen. But if there is a pattern beginning to develop, well, now you want to identify what's going wrong as you reach the final stages of interviews and understand why you're not the preferred candidate, why you don't get the job in the end. And that's the subject of this short video. Hello, my name is Stephen Wright. I'm a career coach here at Career Mentor, and we help high-performing financial services professionals make their next smart career move. So I'm going to divide the reasons why you may not be being successful at interview into two groups. Things that are out of your control and perhaps things that are in your control and which you can influence. The first one, therefore, is what's out of your control. Perhaps they already have an internal candidate and you didn't know about the candidate. The risk that they perceive of hiring somebody internally is much lower than bringing somebody in from outside. They know that person and they know that person's capabilities. Now, you may be able to outshine that candidate by demonstrating ways in which you can bring extra value that perhaps that candidate doesn't have, and also a fresh perspective from somebody coming from an outside firm. But if they've kind of made up their mind already, well, now you're fighting an uphill battle. Second reason is that you might be up against a candidate who they have already decided that they really like, and now you're playing catch up. They may have met a candidate who is an absolute shoo-in for the job, and although you can demonstrate all the value that you have, all you like, they've kind of made up their mind, and it's a very similar situation to the internal candidate. So those things can happen, both the internal and the external candidate, and they're interviewing you and other people because they feel that they need to go through the motions, tick the boxes and adhere to their protocols, but they've already made up their mind. Another reason why it might be that you don't get the job is because you're in fact just too well qualified for it. They worry that you won't be able to bring to bear the full weight of all your skills and experiences. And in fact, you'll end up being frustrated because you simply can't do that. And you might immediately start looking for an internal move, or perhaps even think about moving on from the firm only having just arrived, because you're not able to use all the qualifications that you have and get bored and frustrated. Allied to that is that you might be just too expensive. Because you're a very well qualified candidate and too well qualified for the role that they've got in mind, you may have a number in mind which is just beyond their budget. They know what the market demands and will bear, and they have an idea about what they want to spend, and they just don't want to spend all that money on you. Now let's turn to what are the things that perhaps are in your control. And it might be, first of all, that you haven't interviewed particularly well. It might be that you didn't do enough preparation by researching the company and the people in it fully before you went in to see them. So understanding all the products and services of the firms, the geographies they're in, their history in the news, their leadership team, their values and ethos and so on, all of that you really should have buttoned down before you go in for any interview. Equally, you need to make sure that you're very good at articulating very clearly the value that you have to offer. And that in our training comes in the form of a value proposition, which is made up of a number of value messages. Being able to do that in interview, either in response to the questions they ask, or because you have been able to identify some pain points or desires or wants that they have for that particular role, that's a really useful thing to be able to do. And at the same time, you want to be able to prepare the questions that they have from you, for you. It might also be, in terms of poor preparation, poor performance at interview, it might be that you're not coming across as particularly energetic and enthusiastic, and they're not really seeing much critical thinking going on. So all of that pays into the way in which you come across at interview. Final thing which in interviews, which is quite difficult to achieve, is that you want to come across as that standout candidate with something of an X factor. That's difficult to manufacture, but if it's the right role for you, hopefully that will fall into place. Moving on from interviews then, something which is maybe in your control, may not be, is cultural fit. Now, they will have a sense of what their culture is, and they want to ensure that you're going to be a good fit with them, their ethos, their values, and the kind of people that they've got working with them, and the kind of values that those people hold dear. And it might be difficult for you to cope with that, to pretend that you are a cultural fit when in fact you're not. Ways in which you can improve your performance in this regard is to be very clear about what your values around work and jobs and so on are. Also look at the way in which you present yourself in comparison to them, the sort of language that they use, and generally your rapport building skills will come into play. So cultural fit is an important one. Final thing is references. If towards the end of the process they ask you to provide some referees or references so that they can call up and just check on your performance at interview, check that you are the person that you say you are, then making sure that you have thought carefully about who you want to represent you in this way, that they're on side, that they're going to say good things and things that will match what you're saying you can do in the interviews. That's really important. So there we have it. If you're able to identify any trends that are not working during the interview process, then you can work on them. I'm a great believer in practicing and rehearsing before you go into interviews so that you're game ready. If you are having some frustrations with your interview process, then please do reach out. All my contact details are at the top of my LinkedIn profile. Also, I'll be putting the blog that I wrote about this in the comments below, and I wish you well. Thanks very much.